October 22, 2024. Kazan, Russia. Vladimir Putin stands before the world's cameras holding what appears to be a simple banknote. But this isn't just any currency. This is the prototype of a BRICS monetary unit that could shatter 70 years of American financial dominance. Behind Putin, representatives from nations controlling 40% of the world's population and 30% of global GDP nod in agreement. They're not just discussing trade anymore. They're planning the systematic dismantling of the dollar's grip on international commerce. In that moment, as Putin displayed the mock-up currency, he wasn't just showing a piece of paper. He was revealing the endgame of a financial war that's been building for decades, a war where the ultimate weapon isn't nuclear missiles or cyber attacks. It's the ability to control how money moves around the planet. What happens when the world's reserve currency loses its monopoly? What happens when nations representing half of humanity decide they no longer need American permission to conduct business? The answer isn't theoretical anymore. It's happening right now, and the consequences will reshape everything you think you know about money, power, and global economics. The dollar didn't become the world's dominant currency by accident. It wasn't chosen because it was the best or most stable. It became dominant because of a specific moment in history when America held all the cards and used them perfectly. July 1944, Bretton Woods, New Hampshire. World War II was still raging, but Allied victory seemed certain. Representatives from 44 nations gathered at the Mount Washington Hotel to design the post-war monetary system. Europe was in ruins. Asia was devastated. Only America emerged from the war stronger than when it entered. The United States controlled 2/3 of the world's gold reserves. American factories were intact and producing. The American military was the most powerful force on Earth. When Treasury Secretary Henry Morgenthau and economist Harry Dexter White presented their plan, other nations had little choice but to accept. The dollar would be backed by gold at $35 per ounce. Every other currency would be pegged to the dollar, and the dollar would become the medium for international trade and central bank reserves. This wasn't just monetary policy. This was the foundation of American empire. When countries needed dollars to buy oil, they had to earn them through trade with America or hold American debt. When central banks wanted safe reserves, they bought U.S. Treasury bonds. The system created automatic demand for dollars and American debt, allowing the United States to print money and export inflation to the rest of the world while importing goods and services at artificially cheap prices. For 27 years, this system appeared stable. The dollar was as good as gold because America promised it was. But promises, especially promises about money, have a way of becoming inconvenient when circumstances change. By the late 1960s, America was spending massive amounts on the Vietnam War and domestic programs. The government was printing more dollars than it had gold to back them. Foreign governments, especially France under Charles de Gaulle, began demanding gold in exchange for their dollar reserves. On August 15, 1971, President Richard Nixon made an announcement that changed everything. America was closing the gold window. No more gold backing, no more convertibility. The dollar would now be backed by nothing but faith in the United States government. This should have ended dollar dominance immediately. Why would countries continue using a currency backed by nothing when they could use their own? But America had prepared for this moment. The dollar remained dominant not because it was backed by gold, but because it was backed by something even more valuable in the modern world: oil. In 1973, Henry Kissinger negotiated a secret deal with Saudi Arabia. The Saudis would price oil exclusively in dollars and invest their profits in U.S. Treasury bonds. In exchange, America would provide military protection and advanced weapons. Other oil producers followed Saudi Arabia's lead. Suddenly, every country that wanted to buy oil needed dollars. The petrodollar system was born, creating artificial demand for American currency that had nothing to do with America's economic fundamentals. This arrangement gave the United States unprecedented power. Countries that challenged American foreign policy could be cut off from the dollar system. Banks that facilitated transactions America disapproved of could be banned from SWIFT, the messaging system that enables international transfers. The dollar became not just a currency, but a weapon, and America began using it as one. The first major test came in 1979 when America froze Iranian assets after the Islamic Revolution. Suddenly, countries realized that holding dollars meant holding assets that could be seized at Washington's discretion. But there were no alternatives. The European currencies weren't large enough. The Japanese yen was controlled by a close American ally. The Soviet ruble was worthless outside the communist bloc. Countries grumbled, but they continued using dollars because they had no choice. Over the next 4 decades, America expanded its use of financial sanctions dramatically. Countries like Iraq, North Korea, Venezuela, and Iran found themselves cut off from the global financial system. Banks faced enormous fines for processing transactions that violated American sanctions, even when those transactions were legal in their own countries. The message was clear. The dollar system wasn't just about economics anymore. It was about submission to American geopolitical objectives. But empires, even financial empires, contain the seeds of their own destruction. Every time America used the dollar as a weapon, it created incentives for other countries to find alternatives. Every sanction imposed was a reminder that financial sovereignty required monetary independence. And slowly, quietly, the countries that felt most threatened began working on solutions. The turning point came in February 2022, when America and its allies froze $300 billion in Russian foreign exchange reserves after Putin's invasion of Ukraine. This wasn't just another sanction. This was the weaponization of reserves that countries thought were safe, stored in neutral institutions, protected by international law. The moment Putin displayed that prototype currency, central bankers in Washington knew their worst nightmare was materializing. For decades, they'd dismissed challenges to dollar dominance as fantasies. The euro had failed to dethrone the dollar. The yen remained regional. The yuan was too controlled. But BRICS wasn't just another currency union. It represented something far more dangerous. A coordinated rebellion by nations that had grown tired of asking permission to conduct their own business. Within hours of Putin's announcement, emergency meetings began at the Federal Reserve, the Treasury Department, and the White House. Because freezing Russian reserves had accomplished something America never intended. It had proven that no country's money was truly safe in the dollar system. And now, 40% of the world's population was actively working to escape it. The numbers tell the story of an empire under siege. In 2023, 1/5 of global oil trades occurred outside the dollar system. The Chinese yuan now accounts for 50% of intra-BRICS trade, up from virtually nothing a decade ago. Central banks are buying gold at the fastest pace in decades, reducing their dependence on dollar reserves. Saudi Arabia, America's most crucial petrodollar partner, joined a Chinese digital currency initiative in June 2024. Each development alone might seem minor. Together, they represent the systematic deconstruction of American financial hegemony. But the most dangerous threat isn't any single alternative currency. It's the infrastructure being built to operate without dollars entirely. The BRICS bridge payment system promises to connect member nations through central bank digital currencies, bypassing SWIFT completely. Unlike the dollar system, which requires every transaction to flow through American banks subject to American law, BRICS bridge would enable direct settlement between participating nations. No intermediaries, no sanctions risk, no American oversight. This isn't just about economics anymore. This is about sovereignty. When America froze Afghanistan's reserves in 2021, it condemned millions to starvation. When it froze Russian reserves in 2022, it violated every principle of neutral central banking. When it threatened to seize those reserves for Ukraine reconstruction, it crossed a line that terrified finance ministers worldwide. The message was unmistakable. Hold dollars at your own risk. Donald Trump understands the stakes. His threat to impose 100% tariffs on any nation developing dollar alternatives reveals the desperation behind American confidence. The threat itself is an admission of weakness. A truly dominant currency doesn't need to be protected by tariffs. It maintains its position through utility and trust. When Trump warns BRICS nations they'll lose access to American markets if they create alternative currencies, he's essentially admitting that the dollar's dominance depends on coercion rather than choice. The irony is profound. America built its financial empire by offering the world's most convenient currency. Dollars were everywhere, accepted everywhere, convertible everywhere. But convenience was never permanent. It was conditional on America behaving like a responsible steward of the global monetary system. Instead, America chose to weaponize that stewardship, turning the dollar into an instrument of foreign policy rather than a neutral medium of exchange. This weaponization has accelerated dramatically. In 2000, fewer than 1,000 entities were under American sanctions. Today, over 12,000 face financial penalties, a 12-fold increase that has made sanctions America's preferred tool of statecraft. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen herself admitted that excessive sanctions encourage countries to develop dollar alternatives. Yet, the sanctions continue multiplying because America has become addicted to financial coercion. The financial war isn't coming, it's already here. Every frozen asset, every new sanction, every alternative payment system brings us closer to the moment when the dollar's 70-year reign ends not with collapse, but with irrelevance. The only question remaining is whether America will adapt to a multipolar monetary world or fight a losing battle to preserve a dominance that weaponization has already destroyed.